So as it says, the Azure Data Factory can create pipelines to move data from one source to another. Okay, it can copy data from on-premise sources to cloud. It can copy data from cloud to cloud. Okay, so there are multiple platforms using which it can basically copy our data. Okay, so Azure Data Factory provides a visual interface, so it's a complete no-code platform. Okay, obviously you can code over there as well, but it's a complete UI based as well. Okay, so you can simply drag and drop, and if a person is not having much experience with coding, they can also easily access or work on Azure Data Factory. Okay, so using this diagram, let me explain you what or what how the Azure Data Factory basically works. Okay, so for example, we have these data sources. Okay, so it might be inventory data, resources data, marketing data coming from multiple platforms. Okay, it might be coming from, I would say, on-premise sources or cloud sources. Okay, but we need to fetch those data to our own system to basically analyze it. Okay, so that's where Azure Data Factory comes in. Okay, so the complete part over here. Okay, the data ingestion, data enrichment, and AI engine, all these parts. Okay, so this is what Azure Data Factory does. Azure Data Factory basically helps in ingestion of data. So all the data coming from sources, it helps to ingest that data in either of the sources. Okay, either in our data warehouse or maybe in ADLS that we have. Right? Okay. So these are data sources where it basically dumps our data. Okay, there are multiple other sources as well. We will go through it in a lab session, but at a layman term, it basically fetches the data from the data sources, helps us in ingesting the data to our own data warehouse or ADLS, which can be further used for our analytical purpose or reporting purpose. Okay, so that's what a data factory does. Okay. Why Azure Data Factory? So when you deal with a lot of data sources, okay, it is not always possible to uh, time or orchestrate the data or schedule the data manually. Okay, if you're dealing with 20 or 30 different data sources, then you need a platform which basically helps you to schedule it and monitor it without having a lot of manual interference. Okay, so that a person can more focus on creating their data warehouse or their SQL scripts or business logic instead of focusing on how the data is being copied. Okay, so that's why Azure Data Factory is important. Big data requires a service that can orchestrate and operationalize process to refine these enormous stores. Okay, so that's what I said. So when we deal with big data, a lot of data from different data sources, we need some kind of platform which can do all these jobs for us. Okay. Then ADF is the platform that solves such data scenario. Okay. So it is a cloud-based ETL and data integration service. So if someone asks you in an interview what is Data Factory, so this is the term. It is a cloud-based ETL and data ingestion services. If someone would have heard of SSIS, SQL Server Integration Services, okay, so it's an on-premise ETL service which helps us to copy data from an on-premise server to another on-premise server. Okay, so think of ADF as the cloud version of the same. Okay. So using Azure Data Factory, you can create and schedule data-driven workflows called pipelines, okay, which helps us to ingest data from one data store to another data store. Okay, we can create complex ETL process. So complex as in, for example, there are different sources, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different sources. You need to copy data from first and second source. Okay, then you need to merge these data. Then after this is successful, then you need to copy the data from the third data source and then merge these two data. Okay, so this is the kind of orchestration I'm talking about. Okay, so you can plan which activity should run first and which activity should be running next. Okay, so which should be the parent activity and which should be a dependent activity. So all these things can be managed directly using Azure Data Factory. Okay, working with ADF. So the basic things that we first of all need to know or in ADF is we need to know the data sources. how to connect to those data sources. Then we need to create the pipelines to do the whatever job we want to do. Okay. Then we need to have a monitoring system. Okay, which will basically help us to monitor those activity daily or however we have scheduled. You can schedule it hourly, you can schedule it daily, a weekly, once a week. Okay, it depends upon our requirement. Okay, so this is the basic requirements. So first is connect to data source, then create data pipelines, then monitor data pipelines. Okay, then comes scheduling the pipeline, and then comes integrating with other services. Okay, so for example, we have created we have known the data sources. Okay, then we need to create the pipelines. Okay, then we need to basically see if it is working fine or not. If it is working fine, then we basically schedule it. Okay, after scheduling it, we basically need to monitor it if everything is working fine or not. Okay, so these are the basic components that are required in Azure Data Factory. So ingestion, then control flow. Control flow means basically where we are scheduling things or writing our logic. Okay, then we have schedule, and then we have monitor. Okay, data flow is a complete different part. We will be covering it in the next upcoming modules of Data Factory. Okay. So the components are basically ingestion, scheduling the pipelines, monitoring pipelines, and yeah. So key features of ADF: doing data integration, transformation, workflow orchestration. Okay, designing the way where we can basically orchestrate or time the data. Okay, scalability. If it is a very efficient platform. Okay, so it helps you to copy data in multiple parallel ways. It helps you to write the data in multiple parallel jobs. Okay, and it is cost effective. So cost effective, how it is cost effective? If we compare it with multiple ETL tools outside, okay, like AWS has AWS Glue, we have Snowflake, okay, we have multiple other third-party providers for different cloud, okay. So if we compare the all these services with Azure, so Azure is cheap compared to the features and compared to the UI or easy, I would say the how easy it makes our job. If we compare all those things, then Azure Data Factory is way cheaper. Okay. And security, it comes with the security of Azure. Okay, Azure provides the manages the complete infra. So yeah, we have the Azure security of there. So now quickly going to our Azure portal, and let's create a data factory over here. Okay. So heading to our Azure portal. Okay. So yeah, in the previous class, I've already shown how we can create an Azure portal and how we can access or create new resource over here. So to create a new Azure Data Factory, you can search for data factories in the search bar. Okay. So over here, you see this data factory option. So let's click on that. And in the create button, so you will be able to see all the data factory that you have over here. Okay. So I already have one created. I will create another one in front of you. So let's click on create. So once the create option pop-ups, we need to select the subscription over which we want to create the resource, this data factory resource, and then we select the resource group. Okay, let's give it a name. I will give it as skilled module 5. Okay, region, always suggested to use the nearest region that you have. So I will go with Central India, and version remains the V2. So there are V1 and V2 version of Data Factory. V1 version will be decommissioned soon, so we always use V2. Okay, and not much options properties over here. So simply go to review and create, and we will simply create the this data factory. There are multiple options like Git configuration, networking. So all these should remain default. Okay, we should not change anything over here as of now. Okay, so let's go and create our data factory. Okay. Do ping in the QA chat group if you have any doubt at any point of time. Okay, raise hand if you want to ask something. Okay. So yeah, this data factory deployment is complete. we'll go to that resource, and this is how a data factory main overview page looks like. Okay, so you can directly access it from the portal itself. If I go to the home page of my portal, click on data factories, and in the data factories you can see the new ADF that we have created. Okay, so on the left pane you have few other properties. Okay, we will directly jump into the Azure Data Factory Studio. So let's click on Launch Studio, and this will open our Azure Data Factory Studio where all the magic happens. Okay. Okay. So this is our ADF Studio. Okay, so there are a lot of options that you see over here. Let me discuss each and every option one by one to you. Okay. So on the home page, you see the option of ingest, orchestrate, transform, and configure SSIS. Okay. So these options that we see over here, these are the options that are provided by Azure Data Factory. Okay. In the ingest option, we can create the pipelines that are already pre-designed. Okay. So it's a simple pre-designed workflow for us. We don't need to do much over here. We need to simply provide the source and destination, and everything is done. Okay. But if we want to create some custom pipelines where we want to design each and everything on our own, then we will choose this orchestrate option. Okay. When you choose the orchestrate option, then the main pane, okay, where we create all the pipelines, we create all the data sources, okay, that particular pane opens. Going to the home page again. Transform data basically opens the data flow section. So with data flow section, we'll be discussing in the upcoming modules. Today, we will be focusing completely on the orchestrate part. Okay. So on the left pane, you can directly access the orchestrate part on this author section. If you click on the author section, you will again able to see the complete data factory studio options over here. Okay. Let's go back to our slide. So components of ADF. So ADF is built on a lot of components. Okay, and each components are basically connected to each other. Okay, so if you talk about pipelines, so pipelines is basically if you think of a water pipeline or gas pipeline, what it is basically, it's a medium which carries some object or some resources from place one to place two. Okay, so this is what a pipeline looks like. So in our case, this pipeline is a container where all the uh, operations are happening. Okay, so in this pipeline we create the activities. Okay, in this pipeline we access the data sets. Okay, to access these data set we should have the link service created. Okay, so we'll be creating the first one link service, then we will be creating data sets, and each and every activity I'm going to explain you. Okay, triggers are basically used for scheduling purpose. Okay, so using that we can schedule our pipeline. Data flow we'll be discussing further. Okay, and then we have integration runtimes. Okay, so let's move forward and I will explain each and every topic to you. Okay, so what is pipeline basically? Pipeline is a logical grouping of activities that define a data integration workflow. Okay, so as I told, it is a medium where all the things are clubbed into a single component. Okay, where the complete operations are happening. Okay, an activity is basically a task that we want to perform. It can be copying the data from one place to another. Okay, it can be executing some stored procedure. Okay, it can be copying the data or fetching the data from some web service. Okay, it can be any kind of activity that is basically present in our data factory. Okay, so the white area that we see over here, we draw this area. So this is a complete, I would say, the canvas where we create our pipelines. Okay, so this is the basically canvas of the pipeline. The name you see over here, this is the pipeline name. Okay, you can create more pipelines by creating on the pipeline option over here. Okay, and click on new pipeline. So it will open a new canvas option for you. Okay, so each pipeline does some different job that we wanted. Okay, so this is the pipeline section. We can create new pipelines over here, and then we can edit each pipeline by clicking on the pipeline name. Okay, and in the right part you see this property section. Okay, so in the property section you can change the name of these pipeline. Okay, for example, I'm giving as module 5.1, and in the second I will be giving name as module 5.2. So that's how we create or rename the pipelines. Okay, now inside the pipelines, these are the activities that are available. Okay, so these are the activities that we can perform. Okay, so what are these activities? Basically, they are clubbed grouped into each subcategories. Like to move and transform data, we have copy activity and data flow. Okay, if we want to execute any synapse, so synapse is another Azure resource which we'll be discussing in future. Okay, so we can execute synapse directly from Data Factory. We can access the we can trigger the Azure functions directly from Data Factory. We have batch services. We can execute Databricks notebook. Okay, we can perform multiple options that are available over here. Okay, inside the general category, we have the option of I would say we have wait option. Okay, we can execute another pipeline using this pipeline. Okay, so there are multiple activities which we'll be discussing one by one. Okay, if you want to search any activity, you can directly search over here. So if I want to, for example, search for if condition, okay, so there is an if condition over here, there's an for condition over here. Okay, so you can search directly activities from here and can basically drag and drop the activity and configure it in the pipelines. Okay, so for example, I want to have two copy activities. Okay, so I'll drag two copy activities, but I want the copy activity two to only execute when copy activity one completes. Okay, so there is a simple option to join these activities. Okay, so when you click on the first activity, you will see these four options. Okay, so these four options is basically the method which basically tells you, okay, how your child pipelines will be executed. Okay, so first option, this small arrow that you see over here, so this is on skip. Okay, so if my copy data one skips, okay, and if I have added it, if I've added copy data two using the on skip option, okay, then copy data 2 will only be executed when copy data 1 is skipped. Okay, you can simply click on the line and you can press the delete button to delete it. There's another option of this on fail. So for example, if our copy data 1 fails, then only our copy data 2 will run. Okay, if it does not fail, then it will not run. Okay, and then we have another option of on completion. So on completion means whatever is the result of first activity. Okay, whether it is skipped, whether it is failed, whether it is completed, it doesn't matter. Okay, it will simply go and execute our next option. Okay, so this is how we orchestrate the multiple activities in a single pipeline. Okay, for example, we have copy activity. Okay, so in this copy activity, when I will execute this pipeline, how this will run. Okay, so in this, if you see, the first two activities are not dependent to each other. Okay, or they are not dependent on any of their parent activities, because we don't have any parent activity for them. Okay, so whenever we execute this pipeline, these both will run first. Okay, now when the first activity will complete, post that our copy data 2 will run. Okay, and when copy data 3 will complete, then copy data 4 will run. Okay, because copy data 4 has a parent activity, that is copy data 3, and same for copy data 2. Okay, so these are dependent on each other. Like copy data 2 and 4 is dependent on their parent activity. So when they will complete, then only they are going to be executed. Okay, now for example, if I add one more copy activity over here. Okay, now this copy data 5, 1 and 3 will execute parallelly whenever our pipelines is executed. Okay, because copy data 5 is also not dependent to any. Okay, now just see, if I add one more copy activity and I attach the, or I should make the pipeline in such a way, okay, where on completion of each, like copy data 5 2, and 4. When these three will complete, only then my copy data 6 will run. Okay. Why? Because I have added the condition of the completion over here. Okay, success over here. So whenever my copy data 5, 2, and 4 will succeed, okay, then only my copy data 6 will run. Okay, so by seeing this, what basically you get to know how our pipeline is going to run. First of all, copy data 1, 3, and 5 will execute. Okay, after 1 will complete, it will execute 2. Okay, after 3 will complete, it will execute 4. Okay, and when each one of them, like 2, 5, and 4 will complete, they will execute 6. Okay, so that's how our orchestration looks like in Data Factory. You see, it is so easy. We just need to drag and drop things over here, and our work is done. Okay, we don't need to code anything. Yeah, in each activity we need to go and update our properties, which we'll discuss further. Okay, so I was just explaining how each and every activities are basically, I would say, scheduled or designed over here. Okay, so pipelines done, activity done, then comes the dataset and the link service. Okay, now what is a dataset and what is a link service? So whenever you want to copy some data, okay, you need to point to that data source. Okay, now for example, I have a table in my SQL database. Okay, so this is my SQL. Okay, so I have one table over here. Now I want to copy it in my ADLS. Okay, so to copy this, first of all, I need to point to this data source. Okay, so for that, we have the dataset option and the link service option. So what is link service? So link service is basically a connection to that data source. Okay, and dataset is basically the actual data set which is present in that link service. Okay, now for example, if I have my SQL database over here, okay, so I will create, and I have my ADF over here. Okay, so ADF needs to connect to that data source, my SQL data source, using a link service. Okay, now link service, when link service is created, it basically my ADF will be able to connect to my SQL source. Okay, now when a link service is created, using the link service, I will basically try to connect to the actual data or actual tables that are present in my SQL. Okay, so once a link service is created, we will use it to copy or point to the actual data set which is present in our data source. Okay, so let's go and create our first link service. So to create a link service, there's an option of manage over here. Okay, to create, whenever we want to create some link service, let's go to the manage section, and in the manage section you can see a lot of properties over here. Let's create first link service. So in this, we will be creating basically the, I would say, link service to our Azure SQL data source. Okay, so let's click on new section over here, and these are the list of data sources which you can point, or which you can use to copy data using ADF. Okay, so currently we want our Azure SQL database, so let's click on Azure SQL database, continue. I will give it as a name as link service Azure DB. Okay, and in this, we want to basically provide the, I would say, the connection string or the authentication method to connect to that link service. Okay, so if we want to connect to any of the, I would say, Azure sources from ADF, okay, we can directly connect it without specifying any kind of external authentication or password. Okay, because they are in same subscription, so they can easily connect to each other. So if I select a subscription and if I click on a server name, it will list all the server name that is already present. Okay, so I want to connect to the DB test server name, and database name is Azure DB test, which is already created. I've already created it in the previous session. And how we want to connect to it? I want to connect it using the SQL authentication. Okay, so let me quickly go and check the password that was set for this. So I will open my SQL Server, DB test. Inside that, I had the Azure DB test database, and yeah, the login was Azure and password. And so whatever username and password you use to connect to that database, you need to provide the same over here. Okay. Now, once that is done, we basically need to go and do our test connection. Okay. So I'm surprised why this test connection is not appearing over here. Yeah, it's present. So I'm going to do a test connection. So it says that the connection is successful, which means my ADF is now able to connect to the Azure DB test database, which is present on the skilled DB test server. Okay, so I'll go and create this link service. Okay, now my link service is created. Now I can point to any table or any view or store procedure that is present on this particular data source. Okay, which is my Azure DB test database. Okay, so this is how I created a link service to Azure SQL database. Let's go and create one more data link service to our ADLS. Okay, so go to Azure Data Lake Storage and 2. Okay, so I will give it as a name as ls_adls. Integration runtime. What is integration runtime? We will be covering in next slide. So integration runtime is basically a way to connect to that data source. Okay, so ADF is one point, our data source is another point. So we need to connect or create a link between them. So how we need to create a link? So that's where integration runtime help. Okay, so integration runtime basically is what it helps Data Factory to link to the required data source. Okay, so in this, we first of all select our subscription, okay, and the storage account name which I want to connect. So once I am able to give the required storage account name, it gives me the option of test connection. Okay, if I do the test connection, it says the connection was successful. Okay, so I'll go and create this link service. Now I have link service created for our ADLS, and we have for Azure SQL databases. Okay, so that's what link service, how we create a link service. Okay, now told you what is link service. Now let's see dataset, how we create a dataset. Okay, now first of all, whenever we want to connect to a data source, first we will create a link service, then only we will be able to fetch the data from that particular data source. Okay, so to create a data set, we will go to the author section. Okay, in author section, you have the option of data sets. Okay, now in data set, I will require, I would say, I would want to create a data source, data set of Azure. Okay, I want to point to a table present in my Azure. Okay, Azure SQL database. Okay, so I'll search Azure SQL database in the new data set option. Click on continue. Okay, now you see the name of that data set and the link service. So it is asking me how you want to connect to the SQL database. Okay, so whenever I will click on the select option, it will give me the link service that I have already created for our SQL database. Okay, so I'll click on that, and now it gives me the option to select the required table that you want. Okay, so now if I click on drop down, it will give me the list of all the tables that is already present to that particular database to which this link service is pointing to. Okay, so I select a table and I click on OK. Once I click to connect, once I click to OK section, this is my data set that is created over here. Okay, so the name that I've given is Azure SQL Table 1. Okay, and below, if you expand, you can see the required properties as well. Okay, let me tag it down. So yeah, so this is the property of our data set. So link service is basically the link service it is pointing to. Okay, table which is it is pointing to, that is DB employee, and there's an option to preview data over here. So when you click on preview data, it will show you, I would say, the snapshot of how that table looks like, what all columns are present in that table. Okay. So yeah, this is how our data set is created. Okay. If you want to access this data set, you can easily go to the author section. Okay. And on the in this pane, you have the data set option, and in the data set, you will be able to find all the data sets that you have already created. Okay. If you want to click on the property section, you can directly go click on the three dots over here, and you can click on clone section, rename, move to another folder. Okay, delete a data set. So these are the options available. Okay, now for example, in this data set, you want to club it, or you want to store it in a way that is easy for your team to manage. Okay, so for example, there are multiple teams. So there's an HR team, so I'll create a folder for HR team. There's some finance team, so I'll create a folder for finance team. Okay, so each team might have different data sets, so I can store it directly, or I can move the item to the required folder, so that it is easy to manage it. Okay, so now in the dataset section, I am having two different folders, finance and HR, and inside the finance section, I will be having the required data set. Okay, now I've created a data set for Azure SQL DB. Now let's create one for Azure Data Lake Storage (ADLS). Okay, so I will go and create an ADLS inside dataset inside the HR folder. Okay, so in the HR folder section, I will click on the action button and click on the new dataset. Okay, I mean, new dataset, you need to select what kind of data it is. So it is Azure Data Lake Gen 2. Okay, now, Gen 2 can store these different types of data types. Okay, so I will basically select delimited text, that is CSV. Okay, because I know my data that is present in ADLS is CSV. So I will click on CSV, and in the link service, we can select the link service that we have already created. Okay, if none of the link service is present to connect to ADLS, you can directly click on new over here and click directly from here. Okay. So we'll select ADLS, and then it will give us the path option, okay, to which path our file is present in our data lake storage. Okay, because in data lake storage, the file is present in the hierarchical format. You can directly give the file name over here, or if you don't remember the complete path, you can simply go and browse the data. Okay, so I know I have this demo container. Inside that, I have this CSV file. So I've selected it. So in the container section, it gave me the name. I didn't have any directory. I simply had the CSV file. Okay. So let's go and click on OK section, and it will create my CSV file dataset over here. Okay. So if I want to view the data, so over here at the right, you can have the option to preview your data. Okay. So whenever you can preview these data, which means that you have successfully uh, able to connect to the data source, and you can now access all the data that is present in that. Okay. If I want to rename each data set, okay, for example, I want to rename this delimited text one to something other, I can go on the right part, click on the rename section, and the rename section I can give as the stock ADLS. Okay, it is renamed. I will rename another one, the first one that we have created. It is our employee underscore DB underscore table. Okay, so this is how we rename our data over here. Okay, once we have learned how to create data sets. Okay, we have learned how to create link service. So if we have some data source, we have ADF. Okay, we connect ADF to data source, we use link service. Okay, and to access the data or tables which is present in our data source, we then uses the link service to create a data set. Okay, clear? So this is the flow. ADF connects to data source using link service, and then using link service, we access the data present in that data store or data source. Okay. I hope it is clear. Doubt anyone? Looping in the Q&A section if you have any doubt. Okay. So we have learned about dataset, link service. Then moving ahead, we have the trigger option. Okay. Now, what is trigger option? Trigger is basically a mechanism for automatically starting or scheduling a pipeline. Okay. Now, for example, we have our pipeline. Okay. So let's click on this pipeline. I have this pipeline over here, module 5. I want to trigger it once a day. Okay, so in this pipeline, I have the add trigger option. Okay, so how I access this? Go at the author section, post that, click on the pipeline that you want to open. Now, once the pipeline opens, at the top you see the option of add trigger. Now, to add a trigger, let's click on new edit. Okay, I don't have any triggers created, so I will create a new trigger, and I would say trigger daily. Okay, so trigger daily is what? It is a scheduled type of trigger. Okay, and I want to start it from tomorrow. Okay, and I want to run it every day, once a day, every one day. Okay, and I want to specify, I need to specify the time when it should trigger. So I want to execute it at night 8 p.m. Okay, so I will give it as 20:0. Okay, so I want to, what is the recurrence? I want to execute it one times every day. Okay, at 8 p.m. So if I click on OK section, so my trigger is created. Okay, so every time at 8 p.m. every night, my this particular pipeline will be triggered. Okay, automatically. I don't need to do anything manually over here. Okay, now going to the module 5_2, which is our second pipeline. If I want to add the same trigger over here, I'll go and click on add trigger, new edit, and I will add the already created trigger, that is trigger daily. Okay, and I will save it. Okay, so now both my pipelines are added to a trigger, and they will be executed as soon as the time which is specified in the trigger is reached. Okay, for example, it is 8 p.m., so it will be executed at the 8 p.m. Now there are different types of trigger. Okay, so that is also an interview question. Okay, so what are different types of trigger? Let's go and create a new trigger, and over here, this is the type: scheduled, tumbling window, storage events, and custom events. Okay, schedule, we basically specify the time manually. Okay, when it wants to schedule, how it wants to schedule, every second, every minute. Okay, we specify the time over here. Tumbling window is the range. Okay, so tumbling window is a range. Between that range, our pipeline will be triggered. Okay, storage events. Now, what is storage events? For example, we have our ADLS. Okay, now there is some file that is coming to our ADLS. Now, once a file comes to that particular ADLS container, I want to trigger my ADF to copy that file and dump it to our SQL. Okay, now I don't know the exact time when the file will appear in this ADLS. Okay, so for that we have the option of storage events. Okay, in the storage events we basically point to a container name. Okay, and we specify the name of the file that we are expecting. So as soon as the file arrives in ADLS, our our ADF is automatically triggered. Okay, so if we have a pipeline which copies data from ADLS to SQL, okay, as soon as the file arrives, the ADF will be triggered automatically and the data will be copied to ADLS. So that is what we mean by storage events. Okay, and then we have custom events. So there are multiple services where we can specify the time and we can add those custom events over here. That is not used much. The most used are scheduled and the storage events. Okay, we have the next topic as integration runtime. Okay, so what does the integration runtime mean? So integration runtime is basically a computer infra that basically helps us to connect to execute the activities. Okay, now as I told, we have this ADF. Okay, we have this data source. Okay, so to connect this, we have this link service, but this link service also needs to run on some infra, right? Okay, so it is either I would say, a server or an infra platform where this complete data movement is happening. Okay, so this link service is running on infra that is known as integration runtime. Okay, so IR, which is known as integration runtime. Okay, so integration runtime is a platform where all the copy activities happen in the ADF. Okay, so whether it is cloud to cloud data movement, on premise to cloud movement. Okay, everywhere we want an integration runtime. Okay, so what is integration runtime? Again, it is a I would say computer infra where all the activities are being executed of our ADF. Okay, so to connect to a data source, we obviously need the link service. Okay, but this link service is running on some integration runtime. So basically that integration runtime should have the access to that particular data source. Okay, then only our link service can be created. Okay, so whenever we create a link service, you would see, go to the link service section again. In the link service section, we have the integration runtime over here. Okay, so whenever we are connected to any data source, that integration runtime should have access to that particular data source. Then only our link service will be created. Okay. So in the integration runtime, we have two different options. One option that you see over here, that is auto resolve integration runtime. This is a default integration runtime that Azure provides. Okay. So whenever you want to do some cloud to cloud movement, then you use auto resolve integration runtime. Okay. Now, if you want to copy data from my local system, which is not on cloud, to some cloud service, for example, this is my PC. Okay, in my PC, I have few of the files, and then I have this ADF which is on cloud. Okay, which wants to copy data to some SQL Azure SQL table. Okay, now how you want to basically how we can do this? Okay, because this ADF which is on cloud, we need to create some network connectivity between the cloud service and my on-premise, which is my on-premise desktop. Okay, so over here we can't use auto-resolve integration runtime, which is a default integration runtime. Okay, we install another integration runtime on our own local system. Okay, which is used for copying data to basically from on-premise to cloud. Okay, so we will install the integration runtime by default on our own system. Okay, and then that integration runtime will connect to ADF. Okay, and on that integration runtime we will be creating our link service. Okay, I know that is getting a bit confusing. Okay, but just to be clear, integration runtime is basically used for copying data, or it's an infra where our activities are running. Okay, so if we want to do some cloud to cloud copying, then we can use the auto resolve integration runtime. Okay, and if we want to do some on-premise to cloud copy activity, okay, then we can basically use the, I would say, the self-hosted integration runtime. Okay, so the term is self-hosted integration runtime. So let me quickly go to that particular slide. Okay, so if in any interview question anyone asks you what are types of integration runtime, so first is Azure integration runtime, that is the auto resolve integration runtime that we have seen. Then we have self-hosted integration runtime. This is an integration runtime that we normally install on our own system. Okay, so this is the self IR integration runtime. Okay, on this self IR we create a link service, and then we are able to create to ADF. Okay, and then from ADF you can copy the data from the SQL. Okay, so this self-hosted integration runtime becomes a link between our cloud ADF and our on-premise server. Okay, or our own system. Okay, so coming next to components of ADF that we have just seen. So in a pipeline, we club the activity, link service, dataset, and data flow. Okay. Then we have triggers, which is basically used to pipeline these, schedule these pipelines. Okay. Then we have templates. So templates are components of Data Factory using which we can save the complete instance. So it's a, I would say, image of our complete pipeline. Okay, so we can download the complete pipeline as a template file, and then we can use the template later to again build the same kind of pipeline without any extra effort. Okay. Creating link service, we have already created link service, and we have already created data set. We have discussed integration runtime. Okay, now we will go and we will be seeing different activities that are available. Okay, so in the upcoming uh, demo sessions, okay, I will be demonstrating how we can install these self-hosted integration runtime on our own machine to copy a data of our own machine to cloud. Okay, so for that you basically need to first of all know what are the activities option you have available in Data Factory. Okay. Okay, so there are multiple activities like copy data, lookup, store procedure. Okay, then we have if condition for each web activity. Then we have set variable wait. So there are so many activities. So in this module, I will be covering all the major ones that we basically use for our day-to-day purpose. Okay, the first one and the mostly used is the copy data activity. Okay, so now what is a copy data activity? Copy data activity is basically activity which basically helps us moving data from our one place to another. Okay. So let's go and create a pipeline which will copy data from our data lake storage ADLS to our SQL server. Okay. So I will go and create a new pipeline. I would name it as copy ADLS to SQL DB. Okay. Now on the left pane, we have these activities option over here. So I will search for the copy activity and I will simply drag and drop over here. Okay. We'll minimize this pane to have a big canvas over here. Now in the copy activity section, if you check the properties, we have general, source, sync, mapping, and rest of the other properties. Okay. So in the general section, we have the name of this activity. Description, it is optional. You can give if you want, like what this particular activity does. So I will give it as a name as it copies data from our ADLS to SQL DB. Okay. Now activity is it is active timeout. Now what is timeout? For example, this activity is running for 12 straight hours. Okay, without any response, without any failure, without any success response, nothing. Okay. So after 12 hours, it will automatically time out. Okay. Retry. What is retry? In the retry section, you can basically give how many times this activity should retry on failure. Okay, so currently it is 0. So for example, if I give it as 2, so it will first of all run, and if it fails, then it will retry 2 times. Okay, and in each retry I have given the retry interval of 30 seconds. Okay, so for example, our first run happens, it fails. Okay, then it will wait for 30 seconds and it will again go and retry again. Okay, so this is what in the general section looks like. Then we have our source. Now in source, we want to select the source from where we want to copy the data. Okay, so as of now, I want to copy the data from our ADLS. So the dataset that I've already created, I can click on that dataset option over here. Okay, and in the sync option, I want to go and select the table where I want to copy the data. Okay, so as remember, this DB table, employee DB table dataset points to the employee table. Okay, but I want to point it to some another table. Okay, that is not already created. Okay, because I know in my source I have the stock data, so I want to create in the same stock data table. Okay, so I will open the dataset over here, and in the properties I will basically go and edit, and I would do PPO and point it to stock data. Okay. Now my SQL database dataset is pointing to stock data table. Okay. So again, going back to our pipeline. So in this pipeline, I've had the source, I have the sink. Okay. Right behavior is insert. I want to insert all the value. Okay. In table option, it is none and auto create table. Now, for example, I don't have that stock data table that is pointing to the data set created. So we'll go and click on the auto create table section. And what happens is whenever it is going to run, it will find if the table is present or not. If not, then it will auto create the table. Okay. Then I will go and there's an option to debug. So debug is the option to run the pipeline during the testing phase. Okay. So for example, I've created this. I want to test it whether it is working fine or not. So I'll go and click on the debug part. Okay. So now what happens is whenever I click on a debug part at the below section, you will be able to see all the activity happening. Okay. So the activity name, activity status, activity type, and the run time and the end time. Okay. So currently it is in the queued state. Okay. And now it says it succeeded. Okay. So let's go and see what all things it has done. On the left part, you see there's a small specs button over here, which is a detail button. So I'll click on a detail button and it will say what all things it has done. Okay. So it has read 15 rows of data. It has written 15 rows of data from Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 to Azure SQL database. Okay. Now to see if everything worked fine or not, I will go and check our database. Okay. So I will connect to my database and see if the data was successfully copied or not. Wait a second. This thing that we have discussed yesterday in the previous class. So currently my IP is not whitelisted. So that's why I was not able to connect to the data source SQL database from my local. Okay. So that's why I first of all need to go and whitelist my IP. Okay. And then I will be able to connect to our database. Okay. So again, going to our database. In the database section, let's give the password. Not sure why it is again giving error. Hmm. 430. So now I am inside my SQL database, and inside the tables option, I have the table section over here. So I will do a select star from my stock data. Okay. Now, when I run it, I will be able to see all the rows that have been copied. Okay. So these rows were present in my data lake storage. Okay. Now they are simply moved to the our SQL storage. Okay. So that's how copy data is designed. Okay. Now in the copy data, we have multiple options. Okay. For example, we had the option of auto create table over here. Okay. But I don't want to do an auto create. So I can specify the pre-copy script over here. Okay. So pre-copy script means the script that will run in our database before copying the data. Okay. For example, I'm sure the data table is not created, so I can write a script of uh, create table. Okay. And I will specify the all the name and all the column names. Okay. So I can specify everything over here, and this particular script will run in our database before executing the uh, copy activity. Okay. I can specify other activities as well. For example, I specify it as to truncate the table. Okay. Before copying the data so that the data is not duplicated. So I will specify truncate table. Okay. And then I will again run the debug option. Okay. Now what it will do is it will first of all run the pre-copy script. Okay, and then it will do the copy activity. Okay. So if I specify some pre-copy script, it will first of all perform that. Okay, and then only it will perform the copy activity. So it is in the queued state. Let's refresh it, and it says it failed. Okay, so let's see the failure. Why it failed? It says incorrect syntax near the keyword table. So I think there's some issue in our pre-copy script. So it's truncate should be TRUN truncate table stock data. Okay. See what happened is I had retries over here. Okay, so what it did is if the first failed, now it is again trying to run it. Okay, now if the second will fail, okay, it will again wait for 30 seconds and it will again retry. Okay, so but I need to cancel it because I've made some changes. Okay, so I will basically cancel it and again I will debug it. So I've cancelled it. I have created the pre-copy script and now I will again debug it. Let's see. It's in progress. Now it says it succeeded. Okay. Now if I go again to my database, earlier it was correct count of 1. It is again 15 rows. Okay, so earlier I copied 15 rows. Okay, now I did what it is. I did a truncate before copying. Okay, so it deleted that 15 rows and it again saved new 15 rows. Okay, if I wouldn't have done this truncate table, if I remove this pre-copy script and now again debug it, what will happen is it will append those 15 rows to the existing 15 rows. Okay, so there will be a duplication and I will be having 30 rows of data in our table. Okay, so this is the benefit of pre-copy script. If you don't want to basically I would say, see, you have 30 rows of data. So if you want to perform any SQL activity before copying it, so you can use the pre-copy activity. Okay, the mapping section, what does this mapping section does is, for example, we are having a table already created in our, I would say, SQL database. So I will do it as an import schema. Okay, now in some of the scenarios it happens is our source data column is name is different and our destination data column name is different. Okay, so in that case what happens is we need to have this mapping option. Okay, so I will give you an example. Let me open my Azure Data Studio, connect to the SQL database over here. And I will make some changes in the table so that we can demonstrate the mapping over there. Okay, so I will update the table. So this script as create section basically generates a create a table SQL query for the table that is selected. Okay, so I'm still waiting for that to generate. Yeah, so you see the create statement is created over here. Okay, so what I will do is I will first of all drop the table and I will keep everything same. Only thing that I will change is I will change the name to stop underscore name, and now I will again go and create this particular table. Okay, so now my table is created. Now if I go back to the ADF, okay, and again I do an import schema. So you will see what will happen is it will do a mapping of each of the column whose names are matching. Okay, and it will ignore the column where the name is not matching. Okay, so let it import. Taking a lot of time. Table is present. Still importing. Create a new copy activity, and over there, then I will do a mapping again. Let's see. So SQL ADLS sync is our ID table. The mapping, let's import mapping again. Yep. Yeah. Okay. So see, what happened is it mapped all the column where the names were matching, and you can see the mapping source is empty. Okay, because in destination we have a column named stock name, so we need to go and manually map the column over here. Okay, so I want the name from the source to go to the stock name in our destination. Okay, that's where mapping helps us. Okay, so if we have a difference in the name between two different sources, okay, we can go and map the data over there. Okay, now in the mapping option we can specify a new mapping as well. Okay, for example, I want to add a new column. Okay, so in the sync section, sorry, in the source section, I am getting all the columns which is present in the source. Okay, but I can specify some manual data over here as well. Okay, so in the source we have this additional columns option. Okay, so over here I can specify, for example, I want to specify some name, like I want to specify the underscore name. So this is the value that will go. Sorry, test name is the column name. Okay, so this is the test all, and the value will be test underscore value. So in this case, what will happen is I should have this test column in our table that is created over here. So I will go and add this new column at 20. Okay, and I will create the table again. So now some error near the number we create. So I've created a new table with the test call. Okay. So the test call value is being passed manually over here. Okay. So I'll go and create the mapping again. And let's see. So I'm importing the mapping, the name column over here for the unmatched column. And in the last, you can see the test call is mapping to the test call. Okay. Now, if I debug or execute this copy activity, what it will do is it will copy the complete data and it will put an additional column over there. Okay. So what does this additional columns help is, okay, there are multiple, I would say, dynamic data, for example, current date, okay, current timestamp, which are available in Data Factory. We can directly send those values. Okay, so these dynamic values we'll be covering in the upcoming sessions. Okay, so for now I've given a default value. So let's go select star from DBO data, and at last you will see a test column with some default value which I've passed, which is not present in our data source, but I've manually passed it. Okay, and my name column was not mapped to stock name over here. Okay, so that's how our mapping helps us. Okay, coming to rest of the activities, we have the lookup activity, we have the store procedure activity. So lookup activity, this activity is used to retrieve data from a data store. Okay, so there can be multiple scenarios where you want to fetch some required data from our data store, okay, and use it further in child activities. Okay, so let's see how lookup works. So for lookup, in the lookup section, we need to select a data store from where we want to look up some data. Okay, so for example, I've selected the data store that I have. Okay, which points to the stock table. Okay, And over here, use query. So I can either select the complete data from the complete table, or I can specify the query which I want to execute to fetch the data. So lookup is nothing but a simple select query which is running on ADF. Okay. So if I execute this, so first row only, it will fetch only the first row from the particular table which our data set is pointing. So when I debug it, it will return the output from our the first row from our data set. Okay, let's refresh it. Now it says succeeded. So on the left part, we have the input and the output section. When I click on the output section, you see there's a first row returned in a JSON format. Okay, so we can use these output in the child activities, for example, another copy activities or something. Okay, so that we can basically use a dynamic values. Okay, dynamic values are covered in tomorrow's session. Okay, so this is how a lookup works. So you can specify table section, or you can specify the query. So I will specify a query as of now. Select star from, I would say, the stock data. Number is 7. So I specify a manual query. Now if I run this, so it will return the output which is written in this particular query. Okay. It ran fine. Now I see the output. So see, the serial number 7 was written using this lookup activity. Okay, that's what the lookup activity does. Then next activities are basically a store procedure. So we can execute a store procedure that is present in our SQL database. Okay, so to do that, I will search the store procedure activity. Okay, in the store procedure activity, it's simple. I need to select the link service. Okay, and I need to select the store procedure that is present in that link service. Okay. So in our database, I already have one store procedure created. Okay, what does this store procedure does is it basically, so this is my store procedure, USP create and insert. So it creates a table, okay, and it inserts value in this table. Okay, so for now, if I do table name is your table name, select from your table name. So if you run this, it will say the table is not present. Okay, but what happens if I run this store procedure using my Azure Data Factory? Okay, so let's debug it. So it says succeeded, which means my store procedure ran fine. And if my store procedure should have ran fine, this table should have been created. Okay. So you see the table is created over here. Okay. So that's how a store procedure activity works. Okay. So in a store procedure activity, we can pass the parameters as well. So currently, I don't have any parameters specified for my store procedure, but if we would have, we can directly pass the store procedure parameter over here in the section below section. Okay. So coming to few of the next activities, which is the if condition, for each condition, and web activity. Okay. Now, for example, I have this if condition. Okay. So if condition, in the if condition, I can specify the activities. Okay. For example, in the activity section, I can specify the expression. Okay. For example, it should run only if current date is if the date is, I would say, 2023 07/28 or something like that. Okay, so there are multiple expressions that I can provide in the expression case. Okay, and if the condition is true, then it should execute the true condition, and if the condition is false, it should execute the false statement. Okay, so inside the if condition, I can specify the true events and I can specify the false events. Okay, so that's the leverage of if condition provided to us in the ADF. Okay, so all these activities that we are discussing, we will be demonstrating it in a live session tomorrow as well. Okay, so that you will be able to more clearly understand how each and every condition works. Okay, So in a similar manner, we have the for condition, okay, where we can execute a particular activity in a loop. Okay, for example, we have a for condition, and inside a for condition, I have added a copy activity. Okay, so this copy activity will run for the number of iterations mentioned in this for loop. Okay, so in the for loop, there are the iteration values that we provide. Okay, we can pass these parameters manually or using some previous parent activity. So we will be demonstrating it more in depth tomorrow. Okay, then we have next is something called, I would say, web activity. Okay, so for example, if you want to get the data directly from some website, okay, so we can directly use this web activity over there. Okay, so yeah, these are a few of the, I would say, activities available, like copy activity, if condition, for condition, all these activities are available. We have the wait condition, execute pipeline activity. Okay, so if, for example, I have a copy activity over here, okay, it copies some data, and after that I want to execute a store procedure. Okay, but before that I want my pipeline to wait for 5 seconds so that all the activities are, I would say, or all the copy activities are performed right. Okay, so after the copy activity, my wait condition will perform, and then the store procedure will perform. Okay, so in the wait condition we can specify the number of seconds. For example, I have specified 5 seconds. So first of all, my copy activity will perform, and then it will wait for 5 seconds, and then it will perform the store procedure activity. Okay, so that's the benefit of wait activity over here. So there can be multiple scenarios that you can face in real time scenario. Okay, in real time projects where you can use this wait condition to achieve what you want. Okay, few of the last activities. For example, we have this execute pipeline. So in the execute pipeline, we can basically execute all the pipelines, one pipeline from another pipeline. Okay. For example, I have this copy ADLS SQL DB. Okay. So from copy ADLS SQL DB pipeline, I want to execute another pipeline. Okay. So in the settings, I will go and select the pipelines that are available. Okay. So if I debug this now, what will happen? My pipeline copy ADLS SQL DB will execute another pipeline, which is module 5_2. Okay, so that's how an execute pipeline works. Okay, so this is all about the activities option that we have. So there are many activities, but currently we will be focusing on the major ones. Okay, so these are the activities that we have taught. That's about today's session.